So this weekend, so much is happening in the biggest leagues in Europe and also around the world. I'm here to talk to you through the final days as we come to a close here. I'm going to be telling you what to look out for, what can change on the final match days, what games you should definitely watch, and who to root for. So let's waste no time. Let's get into it first with the Premier League, which on the surface you might think is going to be one of the more boring ones. But it's actually, I would say, the second most exciting. I'd say the most exciting is the Serie A, which I'm going to save for last. So stay tuned for that. That one's insane. But I'd say this one is the second most exciting just due to the sheer amount of teams that have things at stake. Now, relegation isn't at stake. That was wrapped up a long time ago. Same with the title. So, the two more exciting things are done. But all these teams from 3rd place to 11th place are battling for Europe. And that is just incredible. It gets a little complicated. So that's why I think this is a good idea to make it in video form, because I was really confused, doing research for this video. So I think it's good to just lay it all out on the table. What are all the possibilities here? So the big elephant in the room here that we need to talk about is Chelsea, and the fact that if they win the Europa Conference League and qualify for the Europa League directly, that's going to mess everything up. Depending on where they finish, that's going to change things for the entire rest of this top kind of 11 here. So first of all, let's get this off the bat. If Chelsea lose the Conference League, none of this that I'm going to say to you matters. 7th place is going to qualify for the Conference League. 6th place will be Europa League. And then top 5 will be Champions League. And that's pretty simple, easy to remember. Now, if Chelsea win the Conference League and they finish in that top 5, again, it'll be the same. It doesn't really matter because Chelsea will sacrifice that win because they'd rather play in the Champions League. That's pretty understandable. Even if Chelsea finish in 6th, they take the Europa League spot from the Conference League, which means that 7th place qualifies for the Europa League, and then 8th place qualifies for the Conference League, and then same thing if they finish in 7th. If they finish in 7th, they get the Europa League spot. This also gets a Europa League spot, 6th place, and then 8th place gets the Conference League. Now, this is a little annoying the way that Premier League has scheduled everything. Brighton still has to play, so if Brighton win against Liverpool, get up to 58 points, they're huge favorites for this 8th place spot. But we're just going to act like Liverpool's going to beat Brighton or draw and then hope that happens. But if Brighton does end up beating Liverpool, you guys can be in the comments all telling me and I'll do a little update. But basically, any team from 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, all these guys are going to be rooting really hard for Chelsea not to finish in the top 5 so they can get that 8th place Conference League spot. Let me talk you through how that can happen. It's going to happen in this final match. This is by far the biggest match that you need to watch on the final day. They're all going to take place at the same time. So if you have to pick one to watch, make it Nottingham Forest against Chelsea 1,000%. Because they're both within 1 point of each other, and yet they're in 4th place and 7th place respectively. And everyone needs to be rooting for Nottingham Forest to win. I don't care, even if you're a Chelsea now. If you have a brain or a heart, you need to root for Nottingham Forest to win. Not only so that they could potentially qualify for the Champions League, but also so that we can give Brentford, Brighton, Fulham, or Bournemouth a big shot at competing in the Conference League. So I hope I explained that all thoroughly. Basically, anything from the 3rd place to 7th place can change. So Newcastle could finish as low as 7th, and Forest could finish as high as 3rd. Arsenal and Liverpool are safe. And we want Chelsea to win the Conference League, but finish in 6th or 7th, aka lose to Nottingham Forest, so that one of these teams, which will also be, none of them are going to play against each other, but these teams will all be competing on the final day to try and get that 8th place spot for the Conference League. It's going to be absolutely thrilling. It's going to be an amazing, amazing final day. So definitely look out for that. Also in England, we have to spotlight the Championship playoff final, where this is at 10:01 a.m. So make sure not 10 o'clock, precisely 10:01. Do not tune in at 10 o'clock. They're very clear about that. We should all really be rooting for Sunderland here. So that we obviously, if you grew up watching the Premier League, within the last 10 years or so, you'll be used to seeing Sunderland there. It has been weird the past few years to see a Premier League without Sunderland. It's just better to have them up there, the Newcastle, the Tyne-Wear derby. And Sheffield United, although you did bless us with that amazing season where you finished 7th place with the overlapping wing backs, which was a revelation at the time, or overlapping center backs, which was a revelation at the time. Your time is up. We don't need you to come up to the Premier League, finish 20th again. We don't need that. Root for Sunderland, everybody. La Liga, the top 5 is all wrapped up. That's pretty boring. Barcelona won the title, blah, blah, blah. But there's some interesting stuff here from 7th to 9th place. So there's a Europa League spot at stake here and a Conference League spot at stake here. And all these teams are just separated by 1 point. Celta, Vigo, Rayo Vallecano, and Osasuna. And they all play against what you'd say are beatable opponents. Rayo Vallecano play against Mallorca. Osasuna play against Alaves. And Celta de Vigo play against Getafe. So they're all winnable games, and they're all going to be trying to compete for that Europa League spot or Conference League spot. So those are all teams to keep an eye on. But the relegation battle here between Espanyol and Leganes is the one that I'm most excited about. So they're within 2 points of each other, but La Liga is decided on head-to-head. So Leganes already beat Espanyol, which means they're ahead on the head-to-head. So if they win their game, they both play against the bottom 2 teams, by the way, which is even more exciting. I wish they had a bit more points, so this would be a huge 4-team relegation battle, but it's not. But yeah, Leganes have to play against Valladolid, and Espanyol playing against Las Palmas. So if Espanyol end up losing and Leganes win, obviously they leapfrog them. But if Espanyol draw and Leganes win, then Leganes will also leapfrog them, even though they're level on points, because Leganes is ahead on the head-to-head. So that's going to be absolutely thrilling, and that is something that you need to definitely keep an eye out on the La Liga final day. Now, in the Bundesliga, we're going to talk about SV Elversberg, who are playing in the relegation playoffs. And the reason I want to highlight them is because they're from a really, really small town in Germany called Elversberg. And they've pretty much spent their entire career in the lower leagues. Recently, got a little bit of investment, which the Germans don't like. I know they don't like that, but they've climbed their way up. It's not like RB Leipzig level, okay? It's nothing that crazy, but it's a really great story, I think, for this tiny town. They got promoted to the 2nd Bundesliga for the first time in their history just a couple years ago. Now they've already made it to the relegation playoffs, where if they beat Heidenheim, they could make it up to the Bundesliga for the first time in the entire club's history, which would be just an incredible story. So again, if you're looking for something to watch on Thursday and on Monday, definitely watch those relegation playoffs for the Bundesliga, and I'll be rooting for Elversberg. There's also a relegation playoff in Ligue 1. I wanted to highlight that. It'll actually be Stade de Reims, who finished in 16th place, who are, funnily enough, in the French Cup final. But they will be playing against FC Metz. This is not as interesting as the Bundesliga one. You know Metz, I'm sure they are kind of a yo-yo club in France. So Liga Portugal, there's really nothing here to highlight. Just wanted to mention it. Sporting won the league. Gyökeres is absolutely insane. Yeah, there's nothing really to highlight here. But Liga MX is really interesting. So the American leagues like the MLS, the Brazilian Serie A, the Argentinian league, they all are still playing. They play throughout the summer. But for some reason, Mexico just decided to keep up and do it how the European leagues do it for some reason. So their final of the Clausura is coming up on Thursday and on Sunday. It'll be Club America against Toluca, and Toluca are definitely the underdogs for this match. They've never won a Clausura in their history, at least not in this current league format. I'm a little confused by the Mexican league format. But basically, they kind of have 2 leagues, and they both matter equally. So the Apertura happens in the first half of the season, and the Clausura happens in the second half of the season, and they're both the exact same. They both operate like a league with a playoff, and Club America actually won the Apertura, so it'd be a little boring to see them win the Clausura as well. You definitely should be rooting for Toluca here if you're a neutral. And now the Belgian Pro League is definitely one that I find to be the most interesting. So we have to talk about Union Saint-Gilloise here. So if you don't know how the Belgian Pro League works, basically you play a whole season and then they kind of split you up into these different groups. This is the group for the title. So Union Saint-Gilloise for the past 2 seasons have finished in this 2nd place spot 1 point behind the champions. It was Antwerp, and then it was Club Brugge. And this season, they could actually have a repeat of that happening again. So if they draw if they draw against Gent and then Club Brugge beat Antwerp, then they're gonna finish 1 point behind them again, which is just gonna be insane. So if you want history to repeat itself in that way and deprive the Brighton Tony Bluemond Union Saint-Gilloise their first Belgian League title, at least in the modern era, then root for that. But if you want them to, win, give the Moneyball people some satisfaction, then you should be rooting for them to beat Gent. So now we come to the Serie A, which previously I said was the most exciting, and it is just by far the most exciting. We have the title race, which could end in something I've never ever seen before, something none of us have seen before, at least not in my lifetime. We have an amazing relegation battle. But first, let's start with the European places. Let's ease into it. So, AC Milan are out. There's nothing that they can really do. But Bologna, Fiorentina, Lazio, Roma, and Juventus are all kind of battling out for these spots, which is really, really exciting. Lazio could finish as high as 4th, and Juventus could finish as low as 6th. So these guys are kind of all competing with each other. But Fiorentina and Bologna could also leapfrog Lazio, and it is very possible that they leapfrog Lazio because both of them actually have the head-to-head advantage over Lazio. Despite the fact that Bologna lost 3-0 to Lazio earlier in the season, they actually bounced back and beat them 5-0. Fiorentina do have an advantage over Bologna. They have the head-to-head slight record over them, even though they're both tied in their head-to-head. It was a 3-2 win for Fiorentina and a 1-0 win for Bologna. So I guess it goes to goal difference next. But either way, Fiorentina are above Bologna. And let's look at the matches that they're playing for that kind of battle. Fiorentina have Udinese and Bologna have Genoa. So kind of similar level mid-table teams. So they'll both be fighting there. And then Lazio have Lecce, which we're going to talk about. Might not actually be an easy game despite the fact that they're at the bottom of the table, because they have everything to fight for and everything to play for in one of the most entertaining relegation battles on the final day you're ever going to see. So let me explain here. We have Venezia, Empoli, Lecce, and Parma and Verona all kind of within points of each other. Cagliari are safe. So Venezia can actually leapfrog Empoli and Lecce if both Empoli and Lecce lose and Venezia win, because that would put them on 32 points. And that would be just an incredible story. Empoli could also do something incredible here. On the final day last season, let me just show you this. On the final day last season, so match day 37, which is the point that we're at now, Empoli were in the same position that they are now. They were in 18th place. They were just a few points away from survival. And then on match day 38, what happened was, you had to be there. I was watching this. I'm so glad I decided to watch the Serie A relegation battle. Let me see how I can best talk you through this. It was kind of between them and Frosinone. And Frosinone were going through, and then in the 76th minute, they went behind to Udinese, but they were still going through because Empoli were drawing against Roma, and Empoli needed a win. And in the 93rd minute, Mbaye Niang, who's like an old FIFA legend, I'm sure you know him, ended up scoring for Empoli to put them 1 point above Frosinone and have them survive. It was absolutely insane. And Empoli have decided that they want that excitement and thrill from last season, and they just want a repeat of that. Lecce have the big head-to-head advantage here. So if they win and they're level on points with any of these teams, they're going to go above because they won when it really mattered. Empoli have the head-to-head advantage over Parma and Verona. So if they're able to beat Hellas Verona, who they play on the final day, they will survive relegation. There's going to be some crazy scenes there. And then Parma kind of have fate in their own hands. They play against Atalanta, which is a really, really tough match. So if they get nothing from that, and then Lecce and Empoli go on to win, that's it. That's it for Parma. So, gosh, it's going to be an insane final day. But the match to watch there is really Empoli versus Verona. And then the title race, the Serie A title race. This is the biggest, this is the most insane thing ever. So Napoli and Inter on the final day, they've been dipping in form lately in the league. Inter play against Como and Napoli play against Cagliari. 2 games where they really both should be winning. But what everyone here needs to root for, and I'm going to tell you why in a second, everybody here needs to root for a Napoli loss and an Inter draw. Nothing else. That's exactly what you need to root for, because if that happens, they will finish level on points, they will finish level on head-to-head, and instead of going straight to goal difference, the Serie A goes to a 1-match playoff to decide the title. And I've never seen that in my lifetime in any of the top leagues. So that's just going to be absolutely insane. That's exactly what every neutral wants. And we all need to be rooting for Como to hold Inter to a draw. And we need to be rooting for Cagliari to beat Napoli. That's just going to be absolutely insane. And that's what we need to see. So I hope all of this made sense. It was a lot to go through. It's still a little confusing for me as well, but I hope this helped you. And on this final day of football, just enjoy it. And now you know what to look out for. Now you know what stories to follow, what could all change. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to Footballers for more videos like this one.